Hello everyone and welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Ari and I'm an aspiring author. I have a short story published that you could read linked to my website. All through NaNoWriMo, I've been using the month of November to draft the first draft of a contemporary fiction book called Money Piece. And what I wanted to talk about today is actually a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. It's all about the drafting blues. The way that I like to define the drafting blues is when that initial excitement that you have for a story kind of starts to fizzle out. And for me, it usually happens around like the end of Act 1, and you're kind of just like stuck in the swampy middle trying to figure out how to make this book interesting and work and flow. And it's where a lot of self-doubt and frustration can start to come in. I think for other folks, it can happen at a variety of different stages. For some people, it might happen like at the inciting incident or earlier in Act 1, or it can even happen in Act 3. I think it's different for everybody, but for most writers that I speak to, there's a moment when you're drafting that everything feels a little bit insurmountable and everything feels very frustrating, and the self-doubt just kind of adds up to a point where sometimes it can feel like, why am I even writing this book anymore? Like, what's the point of it? It all feels kind of crappy. And let me tell you, it's rough. It is not easy. And every single time for every draft, it like hits a little bit differently. But I do want to say it is completely normal. So if you're experiencing what I call the drafting blues, like it is completely normal, and don't be afraid of it. And honestly, with like the right tips, I really think that you can make it through the drafting blues. So I've compiled the top 5 tips that I have to get you through your first draft and to beat those writing blues. So let's get right into it. So tip 1, set realistic goals. So don't get me wrong, the idea of like sitting down and having a 5K word day or a 10K word day is unbelievable. It's like, okay, yeah, like that is totally the dream. I would absolutely love to do that. I know myself, like I cannot do that. And I cannot do that sustainably. I really think that most of us can't do it sustainably. And I do think that it can be a ticket to burnout, unfortunately. A lot of the times, like if you do try to do one of those challenges, like be honest with yourself. Like, do you find yourself actually then avoiding the book for like the next week or something like that, so that actually having that 5K day winds up netting you fewer words than if you were to have just written consistently for the entire week? Like, possibly. Instead of setting really huge goals, like set realistic goals. And I mentioned this in my last video a little bit. Like in other seasons of my life, like I would have been able to knock out 2,000 words a day, no problem. But where I'm at right now, like I can do 1,000 to 1,500 words on a good day. And so it's not about setting realistic goals that seem like a benchmark that you should be able to hit because other people are hitting it. It's about setting realistic goals for you and for your life and what is compatible with your schedule, your work schedule, like taking care of family, enjoying a social life. It's not just, oh, I heard this author writes 2,000 words a day, so I'm gonna try to write 2,000 words a day. It's like, what is realistically compatible for your daily routine? So maybe that's 300 to 500 words a day. Maybe it's sitting down and writing one scene a day. Maybe it's not even writing every single day, because for a lot of people, that's actually not very sustainable. Maybe it's having one really good writing session a week. But the secret is it's not about how much you write in one sitting. It's about how you're consistently showing up. There's no right way to set a realistic goal. There's no one size fits all. It's about finding the consistency and the schedule that works best for you. And the other side of the coin with setting realistic goals is also like, don't make yourself feel guilty if you miss a day. Like, don't make yourself feel guilty if life gets in the way. We all have off days, like off weeks, off months. Like, trust me, I've been there, and I've been there very recently, honestly. But what matters is really picking yourself up when you're ready to go again. And guilt and pressure are honestly the death of creativity. And so if you're making yourself feel bad because you're not showing up because you missed a day last week, like you're making the process not enjoyable for yourself. And one of the most important parts of getting yourself to show up, to make it something that you're excited by and to make it something that you enjoy, and making yourself feel bad is the opposite of that. And then on the other side of that, it's also like, celebrate the small wins. When you're writing a book or even writing a short story and you're writing something to publication, that is such a long-term project. And actually you find that if what you're really trying to celebrate is, oh, I got an agent, oh, I published my book, or my book went on submission and sold, like those are goals and things to celebrate that are years down the line. Like, you need to celebrate the small things like I finished Act 1. I finished the scene. I hit 1,000 words today. I wrote for an hour today. Or even smaller than that, I wrote a sentence that I really loved, or I created a character in the scene that really resonates with me. It's really about celebrating those small wins, because those are really the building blocks of what makes this craft feel good. It's about enjoying the process, because listen, like if you're writing for the reward of having a book published or getting an agent, like, babes, that is not the reason to write. I'm sorry. like those wins are few and far between. So it really is about just like enjoying the process and making those small wins feel really special. Okay, tip 2, use placeholders. Use placeholders, they're so good. So if you ever sit in there while you're trying to write a scene and you've been agonizing over the name of a character, or you are so stuck on a single world building detail and you've been sitting there for 30 minutes and you're like, oh, I'm so frustrated, like I need to have this figured out before I can move forward. First, you're not alone. It's really easy to feel like you can't move forward unless you figured everything out. Like, I really relate to that. It's really hard to be like, but I need to have this figured out before I figure out the rest of the story. But here's the thing, that kind of overthinking, it can stop your momentum dead in its tracks. And momentum for first draft is actually really important. Instead, just embrace the power of a placeholder. Don't know what to name your character's best friend? Bracket name. Don't know what to name a street? Bracket street name. Can't figure out how to describe the atmosphere of a location? Bracket, put description here. And then move on. The point is to keep writing, even if some of the details feel fuzzy. And honestly, I do want to say placeholders are not just for like names or descriptions or anything like that. Like, you can use them for anything that is tripping you up. In this draft of Money piece, I've literally written like, okay, this scene has to happen where she goes from here to here. I have no idea how to make this happen. So like, figure that out later, right? Like you can use it for a wide variety of things. And I really do think placeholders are fine, because a lot of the times when you're writing something, sometimes you don't have that bird's eye view of a project that you really need in order to understand what actually needs to go there. And so I can't even tell you how many times I've used placeholders in the past, and then I've gone through for revision and I've actually been like, oh, okay, like I know what to put in here now because I see the whole scope. And I see the whole vision and I see the whole image. So slotting things back into the placeholder actually after the fact that you're done with the draft becomes so much simpler than wasting the time in the beginning trying to get that detail absolutely perfect. Because a lot of the times, like, if you do even agonize over those details and you fill them in, sometimes that detail might actually not work and you might actually need to change that later on down the line. So don't be afraid of placeholders. They are so useful and they are so helpful. They're really magical because they also release the pressure of you feeling like you have to get everything right on the first try. Your first draft is not a finished product. It is a first draft. It's the raw material that you're going to shape and polish later. For draft 1, just focus on the structure of your story. Focus on big picture. And hey, you know what? Actually, sometimes leaving placeholders can be kind of fun. It's like leaving little breadcrumbs for your future self to follow. So, really recommend placeholders. They've done wonders for me. Okay, now it's time for tip number 3. Take breaks without guilt, and don't forget to look for inspiration. I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like I'm not being productive enough if I'm not actively writing. And I talked about this in a previous video, the idea between soft writing and hard writing. And I think a component that really fits into the importance between like soft writing, which is, you know, you might not actually be getting words down on a page, but you're thinking about your story, whereas hard writing is actually getting words. But I think also something that's really conducive to the idea of soft versus hard writing is taking breaks. The reason I say that is because writing is a creative process, and any sort of creative project, like, you need time and you need space in order to recharge. And I think that that's something that's really not talked about quite as much when it comes to writing as a creative craft. When it comes to a creative craft, like, it is really important to let your brain rest. Just like with anything, like, it's really important to let your brain rest, and it's really important to kind of like take the pressure off, because like I said before, pressure is really just the number one creativity killer. And that's because pressure tends to take joy out of things, and creativity and being creative and creating art, like, it is a joyful process. And once you start putting pressure on it, it can just suck the joy away from it. And therefore kind of like that creative spark. Here's a trick that I like to use, and I don't use it all the time because I do think there's a really tough balance that you have to strike between taking a break and then kind of like writing discipline in a way. But if I find like I really hit a wall and I'm not enjoying the process, like I'll actually force myself to take a break, and I'll tell myself like, and I'll be very strict about it too. Like, you are not allowed to write for the next 3 days. You are not allowed to write. You're not allowed to think about your story for the next 3 days. And you just need to clean or read or go watch some movies or spend some time with friends and family. And you know what? Like 9 times out of 10, I'll find myself itching to get back to that draft even before like my 3-day break is over. And that really, I think, ties into that whole idea of pressure. Like, pressure can really just like suck the joy out of it and take away that creative spark. And so when you take the pressure off, a lot of the times it's like, oh no, like I want to get back to this and I want to keep doing it because I was really enjoying it, right? Use your breaks to replenish your creative energy. Do things that inspire you. So for me, it's like talking to friends, spending time outside, reading books. Like, those are the 3 things that I know really replenish my creativity. And so find yours. Find those things that really help you replenish that creative well, because they're so important. Writing does not happen in a vacuum. I'm going to say that again. Writing does not happen in a vacuum. It's not just about the time that you spend at your keyboard. It's about everything that feeds your creativity along the way. So don't be afraid to take a step back if you need to. Sometimes the best ideas come to you when you're not actually actively looking for them. So take your break, find your inspiration, and come back to your draft when you're ready, because the truth is, at the end of the day, the only way to finish the draft is to keep going. Tip number 4. This one is the one that I have truly the absolute hardest time with, and that is to silence your inner critic. So, you know, that voice that's like whispering in your ear, that's telling you, you'll never finish this. This is gonna be a book that's never gonna get published. No one is going to enjoy this book. This is a pile of garbage. Why do you think that you can write a book? Those are all thoughts that I've had, like genuinely, and I've had them on like a daily basis. Just being honest, like I have them all the time. And that voice can be harsh, it can be loud, it can be mean. And honestly, it can completely derail your progress if you let it. And not only derail your progress, like it can make you feel like crap. This is one of the hardest things that I struggle with, and I struggle with it even though this is like my 5th first draft, 6th, I don't know. I've written a lot of freaking first draft. That inner critic, I think, is actively trying to sabotage your process. And just remember, your first draft does not have to be perfect. Again, it is not a final product. It does not have to be perfect. It doesn't even need to be good. The best first draft is a finished first draft, okay? So what can you do when that critic starts piping up? Don't make yourself feel bad if you have an inner critic. Like, everybody has it. Sometimes you just need to let it talk and just ignore it. You don't have to try to shut it down. It's going to be there. It's okay. Accept it. You don't have to fight it and make it disappear. It's never going to disappear. Criticism and self-criticism is part of the process. I honestly like to find like a couple of phrases that really help me get through the process. So one of my favorite phrases is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I know that's like a little gory and gross, but I like the idea of it. Is like, how do you tackle something so big and so huge and get through it? Is like, the only way to do it is like one bite at a time, one step at a time. You can find other phrases that like really inspire you. Like, it's okay if this is messy. Like, my story matters. It's okay if this isn't good right now. You know, little things that can help you keep going even if that self-doubt is really loud. Okay, let me help you actually battle your inner critic, because I think this is something really important to talk about. There is no one like you. And I don't mean for this to be an inspirational pep talk, but like, I genuinely believe this. There is no one like you. There is no one who thinks like you do, who has the neural pathways that you do, who has the unique life experiences that you do, who has the unique taste that you do. And because of that, no one can write a book like you can. Like, you are so unique. Every single person is so unique. And your story does matter, because you have no idea if you're writing a book that's going to change somebody's life. I'm like getting emotional. You have no idea if you're writing a book that's going to save somebody's life. And think about your favorite author. And think about how your life would be different if they had never published their books. Keep going, keep writing. It's important. No one has the same story to tell, and no one can tell your story in the way that you can. So keep writing. And so those are some things that can help you tackle your inner critic. And just remember this, writing is a process. It's not about being perfect right away. People take decades to refine and hone their craft. It's about enjoying the process. It's about giving yourself the space without such intense criticism to enjoy that process as well. So just keep moving forward, focus on getting words on the page and telling yourself that you have a good story to tell, and it might not be the version that it should be on draft one, but I guarantee you your favorite authors are not writing books that are published and on the shelves in your bookstore on their first draft either. Finally, last but not least, tip number 5. And tip number 5, I think, is the most important tip, and it's why I saved it for last. It's remember your why. Writing a book is hard. It's hard work. It's a reason why so few people actually finish a book. I can't remember the exact statistics. Let me look it up actually, hold on. Okay, this is the statistic. This is, I don't know how trustworthy this stat is, but according to the Synergy Whisperer, I Googled this, 97% of people who start a book never finish it. And so writing a book is hard. There's a reason there's an attrition rate. It is not easy to do. And there's no way around it. And so remember, when the drafting blues hit, it's really easy to feel like giving up. And that's why you need to connect with the reason why you're writing this project in the first place. So take a minute and think about it. You can go ahead and pause this video and start writing it down. What's the thing that made you sit down and say, like, I need to write this story? Maybe it's your character, or maybe it's the world you've created, or maybe it's the character arc, or maybe it's the theme. Maybe it's a story about representation because you think stories about underrepresented groups need to be in more bookstores. When the inner critic does get loud and when I really do feel like giving up, I like to take a minute and visualize the end goal. I like to take a minute and think about when my reader closes that book, what feeling am I gonna impart on them at the end of that novel? Maybe it's about envisioning how it's gonna feel to write the end. Maybe the end goal is you really wanna hold a copy of your book in your hands. Maybe it's to share it with readers who you feel really need to hear a story like this. And maybe it's for you. Maybe it's cathartic. Maybe you need to write this story. And that's also a perfectly fine reason to wanna write a book. And if you find a why that is strong enough, like, write it on a Post-it note, put it on your monitor, and let it be a constant reminder of why, because finding your why is like having a compass in the middle of a snowstorm. It's your guiding light. It is the reason where even if you're at your lowest, even if you feel like you absolutely cannot do it anymore and you want to give up and you don't know why you're wasting the time, it is the reason, like, deep down, that you know you're writing the story and why it's important, and it's the reason you're never going to give up on the story. So find your why, and remember that your story matters and the world needs to hear it. So when the drafting blues do hit, come back to your why and let that be the fuel that keeps you going. Those are the 5 tips that I have to help you beat the drafting blues and finish your first draft. Remember, the process doesn't have to be perfect. These are also tips that I use that work for me. I'm sure that there are so many tips out there, but just remember, part of the reason why the drafting blues can hit so hard is because there's going to be a discrepancy between the story that you have in your head and the potential that you have for it and what you're actually writing down on the page. The first draft's goal is not to have that story meet its full potential that you have for it in your head. It's to get the bones down. And revision is what helps the story get from that potential, like, raw image in your head to like a concrete story on paper. The job of editing is to get that first draft to meet the story that you had in your head. So step by step, word by word, you guys have got this. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching. Are you okay? That was crazy. That was a crazy thing to do. Dude, you wild. You wild.